So, if you haven't watched my video on Serena yet, I highly recommend it before we get into this video, because I had a little sort of questionnaire at the beginning of that comparing this Pokemon to Serena, and it surprised me that Game Freak would make two pure grass types in the same generation, but make one better than the other in every way except special attack. Because, again, if you haven't seen my Serena video yet, I highly recommend it. But Serena has higher attack, defense, special defense, HP, and speed than this Pokemon, and that surprises me to no end. I think it's kind of ridiculous, to be honest with you. I think this Pokemon either should have got buffs in special attack or speed or something to make it outclass Serena in some way. Luckily, the one thing it does have going for it is its hidden ability. So, as I explained in the Serena video, Leaf Guard gives you immunity to status moves in the sun. So that's handy in situations, but really I think Contrary is the better ability in any way. So what Contrary does is it reverses any stat changes you receive. This means that if you're hit by a Drop Kick from Serena, or you're hit by an Intimidate from any Pokemon switching in, you actually get +1 attack instead of -1. Luckily, this Pokemon actually has another set that I think could work semi-successfully using Contrary, but we'll get to that. So, the stats, as I've said, are decent bulk, actually barely above average attack, and its special attack is slightly below average, but it can make up for it depending on how you run it. So, if we get into the first set I had for it, I was thinking either running Leftovers or Choice Band, and that kind of changes what the rest of the set would be. I said an Adamant or a Brave nature, Adamant being the normal boosting attack but taking away special attack, and Brave reduces your speed. So if you were to run a Trick Room team, then Brave would actually be better than Adamant because you would be much slower, and so in a Trick Room you would be more likely to be faster than some of the other Pokemon. I gave it max attack, max HP almost, but enough to make it be able to switch in on Stealth Rocks one more time. And I gave it a little bit in speed, because there are actually a few Pokemon that are rocking 45 base speed, like a Marowak, both regular and Alolan. So I thought that running just a tiny bit of speed might give you that edge you need to outspeed your opponent. Now, as far as attacks, I said the best move for it would probably be either Leaf Blade or Petal Blizzard. And the only difference between the two, Leaf Blade has a higher chance to critical hit, Petal Blizzard does not make contact. Other than that, they're both base 90, stab, grass moves. The only reason I would ever say to run Petal Blizzard over Leaf Blade is if Toxapex becomes very popular in the meta, because if you were to make contact with its baneful bunker, then you would get poisoned. But if you ran Petal Blizzard, you wouldn't make contact, and so you wouldn't get the same poison effect. Other than that, I threw Leech Life on it because I really hope that Leech Life becomes a central part of the meta, being able to heal your health back, and a very strong bug move so it deters psychic types and things like that. I gave it Poison Jab to help it handle fairies that might normally switch in on it, especially any of the Tapus, because they're all weak to Poison Jab that I can think of. Yes, they are. And then for the final move, it depends on whether you run Leftovers or Choice Band. If you run Choice Band, I put Brick Break for just more general coverage. If you run Leftovers, I think Swords Dance would be strong if you ran the Leaf Guard variant, because obviously if you Swords Dance and you forget your Contrary, you're going to half your own attack, and that's not a very good idea. But other moves that it gets, Low Sweep, lower your opponent's speed, same spiel I gave about Beware. It's really not going to help on this Pokemon though, because you're so slow that even if your opponent's -1 speed, you're probably still not outspeeding them. Payback is an okay dark type move. It really depends on you getting hit first for it to do any damage though, so it's not the most reliable either. You also get Aerial Ace, which can help against the grass types or the fighting types that are in this generation. And one thing I thought was interesting is it actually gets Defog, and it's one of the very few Pokemon of this generation that get Defog through either level up or through egg moves. Defog seems to have been forgotten about because a lot of the Pokemon in Generation 6 required you to transfer one in from Generation 4 that knew Defog. And so I was really hoping that this generation would have a tutor that could teach your Pokemon Defog. So it's not looking like tutor moves will happen. So if that's the case, then Pokemon will either have to be transferred all the way back from Generation 4, which is now 3 generations ago, and that's very hard to believe for someone who's been playing since Generation 1. Or you'll have to run Pokemon like Lurantis, or the other Pokemon that get defogged, to remove hazards because they're so central to the meta. So we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out, but I feel like Lurantis could be a decent defogger in a mid-high tier, but I'd say it'll probably end up sorting out to be lower. The only other 2 moves that I really saw this thing getting were Synthesis and Aromatherapy, which really makes it more of a cleric and more of a utility Pokemon. But the other set that I had in mind was one that I think would be really fun. I'm already planning a Hill team, and that will definitely be the first competitive team I run. I think Rain is going to be fairly decent, with Pelipper now getting Drizzle, which I love. I'm glad to see Pelipper finally getting some use. But after that, I think maybe the Sun could work. So, since Lurantis only has base 80 special attack, I decided to give it a modest nature, max out its HP and its special attack, and then throw on either Leftovers or Heat Rock, depending on if you're running something like Drought Torkoal to set up the Sun, or if you need this Pokemon to set it up itself. So, after you get the Sun up, the idea is to switch this Pokemon in on something that's either extremely slow or on fairly low health, or something that can't do a lot of damage to you, and then you throw out a Leaf Storm. So Leaf Storm normally halves your special attack after using it, but for anyone who's ever used a Serperior, you know that it actually doubles your special attack. It makes you a force to be reckoned with. But even though that's true, having only 45 base speed means you're still not going to sweep as much as Serperior does in OU, because you're still going to be taking hits almost every time something switches in. So it's really situational, and it's very hard to set up both Trick Room and Weather. So I could not really see this being a viable set. I would love to see it work, but I'm just not sure. Outside of Leaf Storm though, good coverage is Weather Ball, because it becomes a fire type move that's very strong and even powered up in the Sun, so that would be handy. I thought Hidden Power, either Ice or Rock, for general coverage, especially against things like dragons, because they'll eat a Weather Ball or a Leaf Storm all day. You could also run Hidden Power Rock to cover flying types that may also resist fire type Weather Ball. And then for the last move, Sunny Day if you're carrying Heat Rock, and Giga Drain otherwise, because it's good to get health back. I suppose you could also run something like Synthesis, but really this is such a situational set. We'll just have to wait and see how Weather fares in the meta, and perhaps even if Weather didn't work so well, this Pokemon could probably benefit heavily from something like grassy terrain, maybe if you were running Tapu Bulu with it. But we'll just have to wait and see. I have high hopes for this, mainly because I love the design. I think even though it's so pink, it's just well made in my opinion,